Hello again, everyone. Welcome to Washington Gun Law TV. I'm Washington Gun Law President William Kirk. Thanks for joining us. Well, the legislative session is over, and it was quite a bloodbath this year, and so I figured today we'd pick a much more lighthearted topic to talk about, something perhaps we can all agree on, something such as, politics. But with all sincerity, we really do have a special guest with us here today, and this is going to be a series of interviews that we're going to be conducting. But we're going to hear from this person who you will all know about what's happening with your gun rights, not only on a statewide level, but what could happen to him on a federal level and what he wants to do to protect your gun rights. So let's spend a few minutes today and have a sit down with Loren Culp. Okay, before we get rolling, you guys know the drill. If you like this video, go ahead and click that like button down below. If you want to stay up to date on issues related to your Second Amendment rights, click the subscribe button, click the little bell logo if you want to be notified when we post new videos. Most importantly, let's keep the comments and discussions coming. That's how we're going to make sure we're getting our videos out to more lawful and responsible gun owners like yourself. Okay, so we have a really special guest. I want to thank Loren Culp for joining us, and without further ado, okay, everyone. Well, I want to really welcome to the channel Mr. Loren Culp, a man who really needs no introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyways. Loren was born here in Washington State in 1961. He's originally from Everett, Washington. His father was also in law enforcement. Loren dropped out of high school in 1980 to join the United States Army, where he served almost 9 years there. After retiring from the military, he went out and started his own construction company, eventually got into law enforcement around 2010, worked his way all the way up to chief of the Republic Police Department. Of course, was our Republican nominee for governor in the 2020 election, and is the author of American Cop: Upholding the Constitution and Defending Your Right to Bear Arms. The book is available on Amazon, and the foreword on the book is by who, Mr. Culp?
Rock and roll legend and Second Amendment advocate Ted Nugent.
All right, so that alone makes it worth the price right there, folks. So check that out. That is available on Amazon. Now, for those of you who don't know, for those of you who aren't in Washington's 4th legislative district, which basically goes from the Canadian border all the way down to the Oregon border, right smack in the center of the state, encapsulates our Tri-Cities and Yakima regions. Mr. Culp here is running for the United States Congress in the 4th District against an incumbent, a Republican incumbent, Dan Newhouse. But you picked up a huge endorsement last week. Why don't you tell all of our viewers about that?
Yes, I did. Just like when I was running for governor in 2020 and received the most votes for any Republican gubernatorial candidate in Washington State history, by the way. I never chased after endorsements. The biggest endorsement that I wanted and that I was after was the people of Washington State. And so that was my attitude. If endorsements came. I've been endorsed by Ted Nugent and Sheriff David Clark. But a couple of weeks ago, my wife and I were sitting having a cup of coffee talking, and my phone rang, and I answered it. And the lady said, "Is this Loren Culp?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Please hold for President Trump."
So you got a call directly from the president?
Yes, I did not know that this was happening. After the fact, I found out that, I knew that he had been endorsing candidates around the country, but he has a team, obviously, that goes through and vets all the candidates. He looked at all the candidates in Washington's 4th Congressional District, looked through my history and my resume, records that they had, stuff they found online, and decided that I was the person to take out Dan Newhouse, who voted to impeach him.
Well, that is huge news for your campaign, obviously. Now, that's a good segue to one of the other little points I wanted to talk to you about. So there is a Republican incumbent who occupies that seat right now. And you and several other Republicans, including Representative Brad Clippert, who is a huge Second Amendment proponent out of our Tri-Cities area, you both, as well as several other Republicans, have thrown your hat in the ring here as primary challenges to the incumbent representative. What's motivating Loren Culp to do this now?
Well, the thing that brought him to my attention, because most everybody that I talked to thought that he was a conservative representative. He's Republican. He's been in office, I think, 4 maybe 5 terms. But when he voted to impeach President Trump, and that got my attention, and then he doubled down and voted for the January 6th commission, which we know is just Nancy Pelosi's pet project so that she can keep trying to shine a bad light on conservative people. He voted for both of those, and it's like, what is going on with this guy? So I looked at his voting record since he's been in Congress, and about 40 to 50% of the time he votes with the Nancy Pelosi and the radical left. He is a Second Amendment supporter. I haven't seen anything except he voted for red flag laws, which we know is, it takes firearms away from people without any due process. He voted for that. So not a staunch Second Amendment supporter, as far as I'm concerned, but a lot of people thought that he was. But I looked at the next voting record, and I thought, you know what, this guy needs to go. He is in the most conservative district in Washington State. This district voted overwhelmingly for President Trump in the 2020 election, and overwhelming. I even got more votes than President Trump did in this district when I was running for governor.
And historically, the 4th district, anyone can go look this up. Historically, it is the most conservative district in the state of Washington. A Republican for the White House and the governor has carried that voting district as far back as they basically have been tracking the data. So you are correct when you say that's a extremely conservative part of our state.
Yep. So I looked at his voting record, saw that he voted to impeach, voted for the January 6th commission, and who better, right? Okay. The most votes for any Republican gubernatorial candidate had the support of We the People, overwhelmingly. Took on a field of 36 candidates in the 2020 gubernatorial race, beat all of the other Republicans by double digits in the primary, and so. I thought, you know what, this is another battle that we need to fight. So he needs to go back to the farm. He needs to get out of Congress. We need someone in there that will uphold and defend the Constitution like I will.
Okay. Well, with that in mind, let's talk about a few things. And I want to start first at the state level, and we'll kind of move our way out to some more federal things. But I know you've been carefully tracking this. You have been a lawful and responsible gun owner in this state for probably almost your entire life. And as you know, our state legislature last week at the 11th hour passed the Senate Bill 5078, which is a ban on magazines which can exceed more than 10 rounds. Now, you've obviously been involved in state politics. You've been involved in law enforcement. Can you shed some light to our viewers on your thoughts on this particular piece of legislation?
Yeah, well, right off the bat, it's a bunch of garbage. I'll just be very clear about that. The government doesn't have the power. It shouldn't have the power to regulate whether I have one bullet or 10 or 30 or 50. That does nothing to stop crime. That's the reason they say that they do it, is to stop criminals. But you're not going to stop criminals with more legislation. You're going to stop criminals. You're going to deter people from committing crimes in the beginning if you actually prosecute people and put them in prison where they belong when they commit crimes. Restricting everyone is not going to stop criminals. Criminals break the law. That's what they do. That's why they're criminals. And so putting restrictions on regular citizens, that's not going to do anything. Criminals are going to commit crimes.
And, with your law enforcement experience, sticking on Senate Bill 5078 for a minute, Sheriff Knezovich out of Spokane, who is who was a fantastic witness, he testified, and he pointed out to our state legislature that not a single law enforcement agency anywhere in the state of Washington, and this was the municipal, county, statewide level, none of them had supported Senate Bill 5078. Why does law enforcement absolutely have no interest in supporting legislation like that? Well,
the same way that most of the sheriffs in this state didn't support 1639. Like I just said, when you restrict law-abiding gun owners in an effort to stop crime, that's all you're doing is restricting lawful gun owners. You're not going to restrict criminals. It's already against the law to shoot someone, to murder someone. So adding more restrictions does nothing besides restrict law-abiding people.
It would seem to me, from my 35,000-foot view, that if we actually enforce the laws that were on the books as written, much of our crime and violent crime problem might find itself a remedy. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. You know, being in law enforcement, I saw it all the time. We would arrest people for committing crimes against other people, arrest the person, take them to jail, and they would be most of the time released on their own recognizance. You know, and it's demoralizing to police officers because you spend a lot of time investigating crimes, you spend a lot of time writing reports, and the criminals most of the time just get a slap on the wrist and released from jail. A lot of times before the reports are even turned in the prosecutor. So we need to focus on the real problem, and the real problem is criminals. It's not law-abiding citizens that have a 30-round magazine. It's the criminals committing the crime. You know, just like it's not guns. The radical left, you know, they do these little steps. It's incrementalism is what it is. And they're working their way to where that they can ban guns completely. That's their ultimate goal. And don't let anybody kid you. That is their goal. They have said that. So all of these little steps that they're taking are headed toward that end that they want. So it has nothing to do with crime.
Every time we give them an inch, you believe that they will take a mile.
Absolutely. And we need people in office that understand that our rights to defend ourselves, they don't come from government. And so government cannot take them away. These are God-given rights that the Constitution, the Bill of Rights protect. The Bill of Rights, the Constitution doesn't give us our rights. We are born with those rights, and the government is there to protect those rights. So if the government didn't give us those rights, the government cannot take them away, and the Constitution guarantees that.
Well said, well said. There was another bill, House Bill 1705. Now, this is a little different than the magazine thing. This is a ban on untraceable firearms and what we call 80% lowers. The state's going to call them unfinished frames or receivers. That bill had a little bit more support for it than the magazine ban. Did you have an opportunity to kind of track that legislation? Do you have thoughts on that type of legislation?
Yeah, the biggest problem that I see with that is it's just more regulation on lawful gun owners, because a criminal can take a gun that has a serial number on it, they can grind it off, right? So what is this really doing? It's just more regulation, and it's more government to keep track of all this stuff.
Now, there was another bill. It didn't get any attention because it kind of died on the vine at the last minute. So you may not be familiar with this, but what I'll get you up to speed on it is Senate Bill 5561. As you know, Mr. Culp, there is a process when people want to restore their firearm rights, when they've been convicted of violent offenses, domestic violence, or felonies, and there's a time period for which it needs to pass. And they had 5561 passed. What it would have done is, for those individuals who had previous felonies where a firearm was used in the commission of the felony, it would have lengthened the time period out for which they would have to be law-abiding citizen before they could begin to petition. And it would have also required that they establish additional grounds before their rights would be restored. Now, you, with a law enforcement background, talked earlier about recidivism with criminals and this rotating door that we see of these career criminals. When you have an individual who has demonstrated a violent propensity in the past, don't you believe that a Senate bill like 5561 actually does address perhaps public safety better than anything like 5078 or 1705 would?
The way that I look at criminals and crime is, if someone is a danger to society, they shouldn't be out in society. You know, if they want to get a firearm, they'll steal one. They'll use it. But that's the problem with our criminal justice system. They look at the symptoms instead of the core problem. And the core problem is the revolving door. So if someone is a danger to society, they should not be out of prison, period.
And we've seen on a local level, especially here in King County, we're seeing on a national level, and this is kind of a good transition into some of the federal issues that we want to talk about, federal bail reform. Okay, bail reform. But we're also beginning to get a large sample size of what bail reform does to local communities. What's your thoughts on that?
I don't think that anything that the radical left is for is going to help anyone at all. In fact, I know that it's not. So all of these things that they're, criminal justice reform, bail reform, defunding the police, right? These are the same people that want to defund the police, for crying out loud. So I'm not on board
we're
with
beginning to see a sample size on a nationwide level of what happens in communities where they did defund the police. We're beginning to see the results of that now, and it's pretty consistent no matter where you look, isn't it?
And anyone with a brain between their ears knew what was going to happen when they started calling for this. I mean, if you do away with law enforcement, with police officers on the street, keeping criminals at bay, from harming, keeping them from harming law-abiding citizens, then what did they think was going to happen, right? And I don't think that the radical left, the Democrats and Nancy Pelosi's of the world are that stupid to think that that was a good idea. I think it was done on purpose. And I believe that the purpose is, you get rid of police, you quit prosecuting criminals. Obviously, crime is going to go up. They know that. We know that. But the ultimate goal, I believe, is they want to have crime get so bad. And, you don't have to be a detective to figure this out. Just look at the evidence, right? Crime is up everywhere. Violent crime is up everywhere.
That is true. That is true. They're
doing away with the police. The police are the bad guys, right? And so just look at that evidence. They want crime to get out of control, obviously. And I believe that it is because they want centralized control of our police. They want it controlled at the federal government, just like they have taken control of everything, our healthcare, our education of our children. It's all being centralized in Washington, D.C. And when crime gets so far out of control, the citizenry, they hope, are going to start screaming and hollering for the federal government to step in. And it's going to be, it's going to be bad when we have federalized police. Can you imagine having a problem with the local police and trying to get Joe Biden to do anything about it?
Right.
Or whoever's president, right?
Exactly.
It doesn't matter. You cannot have that kind of thing going on at your local level. We see what's going on with our healthcare and our education system handled by the federal government. And so that, I believe, is their goal. They want to centralize all that power, and they will end up with a one-party totalitarian dictatorship. We saw the attempt with the voter law that Nancy Pelosi tried to push through. We would never have another conservative elected in this country at all. We would have a one-party totalitarian dictatorship, basically, if her voting law would have got approved. So they want to centralize power in Washington, D.C. at the federal government level. And that's not where it belongs.
Well, talking about centralizing power, and you may end up in Congress, so I'm sure you've probably done some homework on this. House Resolution 127, authored by Sheila Jackson Lee, a huge proponent of our Second Amendment rights out of Texas. This bill, if enacted in the law, and I actually had to go back and double check this because I kept doing double takes, like, no, it doesn't really say that. So let me go over this with you. First of all, there'd be a national firearms registration. So all guns everywhere have to be registered with the federal government. Number two, every person who wants to carry a firearm would need to get a federal license in which the United States Attorney General would have the authority to approve or disapprove. In order to be approved, you have to undergo a background check, not too uncommon. You also have to undergo a psychological evaluation that the AG, in this case, Merrick Garland, would get to understand what the standards are of that. You have to complete a training course, and you have to carry mandatory insurance. Okay, that's in order to carry a firearm. But wait, there's more. You would need a new federal license if you just wanted to display an antique firearm. You can be denied possession of a firearm or your license to carry a firearm for any reason, including treatment, even for substances not prohibited by federal law. So someone who maybe 20 years ago went through alcohol treatment or something like that, they would be denied the right to possess a firearm. And then we would have a whole new definition of, you're going to love this, military style weapons. And that would include a ban on all firearms which have a magazine holding 10 rounds or more. So that's House Resolution 127. Thoughts on why does somebody propose a piece of legislation like this?
Well, Sheila Jackson Lee, if you remember, is the one that called for Democrats to confront any conservative that they see and get in their face and push back. She's a very radical leftist. She's wanting a federal registration, a database being kept by the Attorney General. They want they want everybody's name, the make, model, serial number,
right,
all of your information, like you said, a background check, and kept by the Attorney General, which is absolutely ridiculous. It goes right along with what I said. They want everything centralized at the federal level. This is not freedom. This is not the Second Amendment. This is not Article 1, Section 24 of the Washington State Constitution. This is just more of their federal government control that they want. And the goal, again, is to get rid of firearms.
Now, here's another topic that has had my viewers just going crazy the last few weeks. And you have a law enforcement background. I want to talk to you about the ATF. The ATF is a police agency that I've been working with for the last few years, and they're different than any other law enforcement agency I've ever worked with. When I worked with the Washington State Patrol, I work with local law enforcement agencies in Washington State. There's this level of professionalism, there's this level of respect, and there's this level of consistency. Even if I don't like what I'm getting, at least that particular agency is consistent. Now with the ATF, I don't get any of that. And they seem to be moving the goalpost on otherwise lawful and responsible gun owners all the time. And there's those who cry for the abolition of the ATF. And I don't know if that's realistic, but what needs to be done to essentially rein them in a little bit so that they operate like other law enforcement agencies?
Well, again, that's the problem with having all of these things handled by the federal government. There's a thing called the U.S. Constitution. And I have a copy of one right here. And there is nowhere in this document that gives the federal government the authority to have someone have an agency like ATF or the Department of Education. It's not in the Constitution. And when you read toward the end of the original Constitution and the first 10 amendments, the 10th Amendment says that anything that's not written in the Constitution for the federal government to do, that's left up to the states or the people. Right. And so I want the Constitution, I want our federal government to get back within the confines of the Constitution. I don't want it doing everything that it does. I don't want it in charge of public education like it is. That's how we ended up with critical race theory. That's how we ended up with the X-rated sex education. That's all being dictated from the federal government. And when you centralize power, like I talked about before with law enforcement, if you centralize any power to the federal government, then it's going to be easily manipulated by whoever's in power in the Congress or the Senate or the White House. We need that responsibility to teach our children, whether that's sex education or regular education. We need that power closest to the people in the state or the local level. I want parents in charge of education of their children. So ATF, there is no place in the Constitution for an agency that regulates alcohol, tobacco, and firearm, period. And when I am in Congress, well, everybody that's in Congress, when they take that oath, right? They raise their right hand and I swear an oath that I will uphold and defend the Constitution, not what I think we should do, not what a special interest group pushes me to do or pays me to do, but what is in the Constitution. And if you hired an employee and you give them an employee manual and you make them swear an oath that hey, I'm going to work for your company. I'm going to do everything that's in this employee manual. I swear before God and everybody. And then they don't do it. They just lied to you, your face. And that's what elected public servants do. They swear an oath before God and the entire country that they will uphold and defend what is in this Constitution. And then they get back there and they start doing everything that is not. I would love to get our federal government back within the confines of the Constitution and follow the 10th Amendment. Everything else is left to the states and the people. It's easier to control what's being done to you if it's being done by your local government.
Right.
It's easier for you to get a group of people together and go and complain and get it changed or get those people voted out of office.
I think, and I want our viewers to understand this, is that the creation of the 10th Amendment and the whole idea of states' rights is that as a nation, we were cognizant of the fact that we were not a one-size-fits-all nation. And that certainly as we have grown as a country and we've become far more diverse from all sorts of different angles, the ability for local government to adjust to the needs of those particular communities is essential to proper governance of the United States. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, our founders, the states created the federal government,
right,
not the other way around. And our founders were afraid of the federal government, too much centralized power. And it would become kind of a dictatorial, telling the states what they're going to do. But so they got together and they came up with the Bill of Rights. And I know that they had the discussion. Well, it doesn't say that they can't do this. It doesn't say that they can't do that. And so instead of having a volume of things that the federal government can't do, they wrote the 10th Amendment and said, whatever's not in the Constitution is left up to the states and the people. You can't do anything. So it's kind of the catch-all,
right,
for boxing in the federal government. But it's not followed. It's not upheld. It's not enforced by most public servants who take an oath to do exactly that, but they don't.
Mr. Culp, we just have a couple minutes left here. I want to talk about 3 of your big talking points. I want to kind of give you the floor. For those of you watching this video, culpforcongress.com. Culpforcongress.com is Loren's website. It's a great website, so you can check out more. 3 issues that are kind of spotlighted on your homepage here. Election integrity. What do you want to tell our viewers about that?
We have to have election integrity. If we don't have election integrity, we don't have a country. If criminal activities are being put in place when we go to vote and our vote doesn't count, or someone that shouldn't be voting is voting, it cancels out a person who is legally voting. We need to have only American citizens vote. I believe that we should go back to the way it used to be, where we didn't have mail-in voting unless you had a really good excuse, an absentee ballot, where you show up at the polling place, they check to make sure that you're a registered voter, they check your ID, they hand you one ballot, you go over, you fill it out, and you turn it in. With mail-in voting, it's ripe for criminal activity. Dinesh D'Souza has a documentary coming out. It's called 2,000 Mules. It's coming out shortly. There's a trailer for it right now. But he has documented and videoed, through public records requests, he got video surveillance of the voting drop boxes in several cities. And he has documented the same people. That's why it's called 2,000 Mules. The same people over and over riding up to these ballot drop boxes on bicycles, dumping a bunch of ballots in there. And then a little bit later, they're at another drop box or pulling more ballots out of their bag and throwing them in. So it just leaves too much room for fraud and cheating.
Another issue you have here, and this is a bit of a hot button issue in Washington State, the vaccine mandate. And let's recap things here. We lost a football coach in this state over the governor's vaccine mandate at one of our 2 very large state universities. So this has garnered a lot of attention in this state. Your position on vaccine mandates?
Well, we've not only lost coaches, but we've lost
troopers,
government employees, Department of Transportation,
troopers, firefighters, doctors, nurses. I mean, you can replace a football coach. You're absolutely right. Football coaches are replaceable. Troopers, nurses, firefighters, they're a little harder to replace.
Well, our first responders, our nurses, our doctors, through the whole first part of this pandemic, they were the frontline heroes.
Right.
They were working in the hospitals. They were running the ambulances. They were showing up on calls. They were dealing with it. And then our governor and our president came out with this mandate that said, if you don't get the vaccine, you're going to be fired. What happened to the hero status of these people, right? You're taking away their personal choice. We are our own person. The governor doesn't own us. He's a public servant. His job is to run the state government, not run every aspect of our lives, not get involved in our healthcare. If I want to get a shot, then it's up to me. And that's a conversation that I can have with my doctor if I want to, not my public servant. Where's the servant part of being in office, right? They think that they're dictators, and we, the people, decide what we're going to put in our body, not a governor.
The last issue on your homepage, and this is also an issue that's garnering a lot of attention nationwide right now, is critical race theory. Your position on that and what we can do about that.
Well, that, again, I talked a little bit about that, all the power being centralized at the federal government level for education of our children. That's where that's coming from, because it went out to all the states, all the school districts all across this country. It's coming from the Department of Education, which again is not a constitutional department. And I will push to abolish the federal Department of Education and get that power back in the hands of the parents at the local level. So anytime that you teach children or anyone else or say that because of the color of your skin, you're either a victim or a perpetrator, that is wrong. We should not be judged by the color of our skin, like Martin Luther King Jr. said, but by the character of our person, not by the color of our skin.
All right. Well, Mr. Culp, I want to thank you a huge amount for joining us today. It's been very enlightening. I know you're a really busy guy. Any final words you want to give to all of our lawful and responsible gun owners out there who are going to be watching? Any final messages you want to give them?
Yeah, absolutely. This is the battle for our country. It's very clear that the Marxists, the socialists, the communists, whatever you want to call them, the radical left, it's very clear that they are trying to take over our country and turn us from a constitutional republic into a socialist nation. We cannot sit on the sidelines and allow that to happen. This is not a spectator sport. We're not going to be playing nice. When I get back into Washington, D.C. and I'm in office, I'm not going to see how I can work across the aisle because the left has absolutely lost their mind. I'm going to have the Constitution in one hand, I'm going to push back with the other. And we need to get our government back under control. And I need people's help. I'm going up against an incumbent who's been in office for about 5 terms. He's got a lot of special interest groups behind him. And I have we the people, you watching this. So I need all the donations and volunteers that we can get. This is a fight that we can win. I'm way ahead of him in the poll right now. Even though there's I think 5 other Republicans running. I went against 36 of them in the governor's race, but I need the help. And our website is culpforcongress.com.
Loren, thank you so much for your time. Best of luck with your campaign and best to you and your family for everything you have in the future for you. Okay.
Thank you, William. I appreciate it.
Well, I want to thank Loren again for taking time out of his incredibly busy schedule to join us today, to sit down, to have such a candid and frank discussion and discuss some of those important issues that matter to you, the lawful and responsible gun owner. Listen, you may have more questions about this political issue or anything else related to your Second Amendment rights. And if you do, don't ever hesitate to contact us at WashingtonGunLaw.com, or of course you can call us directly at 425-765-0487. Now, let's remember, part of being the lawful and responsible gun owner, like we talk about all the time here at Washington Gun Law, is to know what the law is in every situation and how it applies to you in any instance that you may find yourself. Until next time, thanks for watching and stay safe.